We want you to reveal all of your secrets and leave no stone unturned.
Okay. Well, the secret is have a best friend who is an exceptional communicator and a therapist. That's all I got.
And that's Alan Seawright, everybody. Thank you so
Yep.
much for being
It's
here.
been great being here, guys. All right.
Can we book Jono? Get Jono on the phone, somebody. This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Daren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions. Today on the episode, we are joined by Alan Seawright, one of the co-hosts of the show Cinema Therapy on YouTube, and we dive into the question, what do you guys think about AI? Oh, we're tackling that one today. It's going to be a fun one. This is Truly Independent, episode 10. Garrett, hey man.
Hey, welcome to the episode. How you doing, Daren?
Oh, I'm
Darren,
good.
like
Stretching out. Oh, thank you. I worked out this morning and forgot to change my shirt before the podcast. So I'm wearing my Project Red t-shirt from like 10 or 12 years ago.
What, educate me on the significance. What is 2 weeks, parentheses?
Oh, Project Red was a thing that, it was like a nonprofit organization that started, and they partnered with like Gap and Apple, and they had basically red versions of products that you could buy. And every time you did that, it would provide 2 weeks of like medical care for people in Africa. Gotcha. And so I remember I bought like the red iPhone, and I bought the red phone case, and I bought the red shirt that said 2 weeks. And
it was a red,
I don't know, it was a shirt that looked good. And there was a red iPod, and we're getting really back in the day. What's an iPod? But yeah, it was one of those things, and now it's just a shirt that fits me well. So
it's your exercise shirt. Well, good. Well, that's cool. Speaking of shirts, we've just launched our Kickstarter. Our Kickstarter for Faith of Angels is still live and active, and there are shirts as one of the rewards for donating. So get on there, and we'd invite anybody who's listening to go check that out.
That was a brilliant segue. Nicely done. Well, awesome. We've got an amazing friend of ours guest today, and we're excited to get to that. But did you see any movies in theaters in the last week?
I did. Last week, I was invited to a premiere, I guess it's a premiere for an upcoming Christmas movie, an independent film called Christmas of Wonders. And it was directed by a buddy of mine, talented director named Nathan Smith, and it'll release on Hallmark or Great American Movies or on one of those streaming sites, and it's fun. It's a cute movie and fun to see a lot of local talent come together and just kind of get behind it. I love that these independent films can be small or targeted, and it's still just as much as a party and a celebration of creative arts as something big.
That's awesome. I unfortunately did not go to theaters last week or see movies. Last week was like soccer tournaments, and oh my gosh, life. You know,
yeah.
None of us are perfect here. So I wanted to say that out loud to just make sure people know I don't get to see movies every week. I try, but last week it did not work out.
No, I
and
get
that's
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to see 2 this week. That's just how it
you
goes.
Can make up for it. You can repent. Let's look at the box office. This is, we're recording this after the weekend of July 12th through 14th. And just again, to prove our model, we've got, your top film was Despicable Me. We've got Long Legs that came out, 22 million. And then scroll down, there's nice representation of Angel Studios. Sound of Hope is number 9. They're still on 2,000 screens. But the number 10 movie is a movie called Indian 2. No distributor listed. It was on 525 screens, per screen average of $2,285. It made $1.2 million, and it broke into the top 10. That's our goal.
So great.
That's what we're trying to do. I mean, we should. That could be a case study for what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting if you look down too from there's a movie called Touch that made 470,000 off of 316 screens, and that was put out by Focus Features. And so that's a distributor that people have heard of. So it's not only a strategy that works for us indies, like it's a strategy that works. So when you don't have the big brand awareness of like, this is the second or the fourth movie in a franchise that has already made. I just read that Despicable Me was the first animated franchise to cross $5 billion in box office because they have like 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever movies in that franchise. I guess it's just 4 because it's Despicable Me 4. I don't know if they count the Minions.
They got to count the Minions, yeah.
Yeah, but then you've got Inside Out 1 and 2. And so that makes sense. A Quiet Place, day one, can go wide because it's the third movie in a franchise, right?
Sure.
And so it's just really interesting to see that even bigger distributors are using this strategy because it makes sense, right? You're not spending way, way, way too much money to have empty theaters. You're going out and saying, well, what's the core audience think about this? Let's release it in a few hundred. And if it's being well received, then let's put more fuel on the fire, grow the number of screens, number of theaters, reach more people. And that way you're not overspending. It's really, really smart strategy.
It's fun. It's fun to see it work. And we're not, the films that we mentioned, we're not necessarily endorsing the film. I don't know much about these films, but the model that we're talking about as far as building an audience, limited distribution, putting it on a certain amount of screens, choosing a good release date, that we certainly endorse that. So we're again recording this in July. We are 59 days away from the opening night of Faith of Angels, which is.
Do you have a big calendar on your wall? You're just like ripping 29 days left, 13 days left.
No, it's gray hairs. I'm counting gray hairs. I don't have any, so it doesn't matter. So yes, 59 days, and we've upped our distribution meetings to weekly now, and our phase, we've ended our unlock the trailer phase. That was a great campaign. I think we talked about that last week, but it received 1,000 emails from unlocking the trailer. We've now shifted into the Kickstarter campaign, which we will use those emails and our existing list to now say, hey, these people were interested, these wonderful audience and supporters were interested enough to send us their email and unlock the trailer. And on that unlock the trailer, there was a survey to say, would you like to participate in promoting the film? So we will reach out to them and I'll say, here are ways you can promote. Either share this Kickstarter, either back this Kickstarter, or reach out and fund a group screening.
Yeah. So that's where we're at in the process. As we release this, as we record this, I should say, it's the day that our Kickstarter went live. So we don't have, really data to look at yet, but, the strategy, we're running the play as we structured it, right? Build up the email list, make sure that we've kind of warmed up that audience by sending them about 2 months or 6 weeks worth of emails up to this point so they understand who we are and that they're getting weekly emails from us so that when there's an email, it doesn't come out of the blue of like, hey, we have a Kickstarter. Hey, we need your help. Hey, go check this thing out. They're kind of like, oh, they're on board. They're following along. And so we grew the email list by about 1,600 people over the last month. And it's been really rewarding to be able to interact with so many people and get such great response from everything. But that's the play, right? We spent the previous 6 episodes building up to the point where as we're recording, episode, I guess this will come out as episode 10, but it's like I don't know how many we've recorded at this point. But yeah, we've done the work to where now we can kind of rely on that audience and use that audience and work with that audience rather than begging and pleading out of the blue. Like, wait, who's this guy? What's 3Coin? Like, so that's how we've done it. We'll tell you how it works once the Kickstarter gets going and once we have some data coming in and some donations coming in, people backing the project, but really excited to see. And it's so fun to have the 2 releases coming out within 2 months of each other, basically, because on one, we're a little more hands-off, but on this one, it's very hands-on. And it's so rewarding to be able to interact with the audience every day and to see the excitement and the desire to support and to go see this movie. It's really fun.
I can't wait, and it's been fun to be on this journey with you. Okay.
Alrighty, we do have a guest today.
Let's bring him on. All right, Alan.
Yeah, we've got a great guest today. So Alan and I go way back. We talk about this in the interview, so I don't want to belabor it here. But we go way back. We're all friends. We've known each other for over a decade, the three of us. And so I'm really excited because they've built a really big audience for the stuff that they're working on. So I'd say we just get into it.
Let's do it.
Hey, indie filmmakers and movie lovers. This show is sponsored by Purdy Distribution. Since 2011, they've been bringing incredible independent films to theaters, like Garrett Batty's The Saratov Approach, T.C. Christensen's Love Kennedy, and McLean Nelson's Once I Was a Beehive. They've worked with top-notch directors like Mitch Davis and Mark Goodman, specializing in family, faith-based, and funny films. This year alone, they've released hits with JK Studios like Go West and Villains Inc., and have even branched out internationally with films shot in South Africa and Japan. Purdy Distribution works closely with indie filmmakers, designing personalized distribution plans, whether it's a theatrical release or straight to streaming on platforms like Amazon, iTunes, Google, and more. If you have a PG or PG-13 film ready for the world, think about reaching out to Purdy Distribution. They're approachable and knowledgeable, ready to help you visualize your film's distribution. Even if your film isn't fully polished, they can offer valuable guidance. Plus, if you need that crucial distribution piece for investor packages, Purdy Distribution can provide a letter of intent to distribute, helping you secure funding without locking you into a contract. Mark your calendars for Purdy Distribution's upcoming releases: Tokyo Cowboy on August 30th, the digital release of Thabo and the Rhino Case on September 1st, Faith of Angels in theaters on September 12th, Villains Inc. on Amazon and iTunes on October 1st, and The Carpenter on November 1st. To stay updated on these releases and more, sign up for their newsletter at purdydistribution.com. That's P-U-R-D-I-E distribution.com. Now, back to the show. Rolling.
All right, here we go, guys.
What's up,
Everybody
guys?
looking good?
I feel great. How do you guys feel?
So good.
I'm gonna try to look down the barrel, but sometimes, Garrett, your face is so pretty.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna get distracted. Also, what are all those little guys behind you on the wall?
Oh, is my face in the way? These? I was hoping. I wasn't sure. I didn't think. Oh, those old things.
Oh, those little guys. What? No, seriously, what are those? I don't know what they
are. Those are awards. Each movie has an award shelf on it, right?
Oh,
so there's Scout Camp,
okay,
and Freetown, and then Saratov was well recognized at the Utah Film Awards.
Okay,
and the new one,
okay.
Carpenter.
Very
He's got
cool.
That poster hung up, so that's what this.
This is the closest I have is a fan-made poster, and there's no award above it. That's just a prop from the movie.
Where's your Emmy?
Because I've only ever made one movie.
Emmy?
Yeah,
those aren't for movies.
Come on.
They're out in my set where I make my show.
You don't need an ego trip space like I do. You know, I need reminders. Like, what am I even doing? I'm like, okay, well, at least.
Oh no, Garrett, I'm the one who needs therapy. I need the ego trip more than anybody.
At any rate, and so that in order to figure this out, we have guests that know what they're doing, and that brings us to you, Alan. We're so excited to have you here. I know that you've done some podcasts in the past, but I don't have an intro or anything like that. I also know you've made vocal appearances in my films, and that's really why I'm excited to talk to you.
It's true. Just two of them so far.
That's true. That's true.
Just two. We gotta turn this into a thing. I gotta show up more.
I know it would be fun, right? Just you'd be the Easter egg. Okay, so anyway, let's get serious on the podcast. Sorry, Daren, go ahead. Alan, you invited Alan. You guys are business partners and dear friends, and please introduce and fire away.
It's true, Daren. We met, nearly 20 years ago now. It's 18 years ago.
Yeah.
you were running sound, like live in a theater sound for a comedy troupe at our alma mater. And I made a movie.
I didn't graduate. Did you graduate? I don't. It's
No,
not
no, we both
technically my
dropped
alma mater.
Hey, we went there.
We went there for many years and gave them
A lot of years. I went there more years than you did. I went there probably as many years as you and Garrett put together. But yeah, I had made a film with a bunch of the members of that comedy troupe, and you, through a series of pestering text messages and whatever else, managed to let me know that you did post sound on movies. And so I called you up, and you ended up being the largest part of the budget of CTU Provo, my feature directorial debut, most of which was paid in 1s and 5s out of a plastic bag in a
Smith's parking
grocery store parking lot.
That sounds pretty shady. That sounds really shady.
It was pretty shady. Charon Prabhakar, a mutual friend of all of ours, paid me my initial down payment with his tip money from working at Sundance over the summer.
Yeah. It was pretty great. Like, I cut him a check from the movie budget, and then he was like, here, just take a bag of all my singles. Anyway, it was awesome. But then we launched a production company together, and we were business partners for 8 years?
8 or 9 years.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Alan was the best man at my wedding. We've done a bunch of short films. We've written a bunch of scripts together. Like, we go way, way back. Our kids are friends. My kids call Alan Uncle Alan. So, like, that's who we're dealing with today. One of my best friends, Alan Seawright. Thanks for joining us. What we're here to talk about today, I'm so excited because, Alan, we need to give a little bit of context, people. I'm not sure how much we will have covered in the intro by this point, but maybe we'll leave it out as we record the intro after we do the recording of you. But in 2020, you ventured off and started a little internet show called Cinema Therapy with a friend of ours, John O'Decker. And it blew up faster than like almost any YouTube channel I'd ever seen. And within a year or two, you had a couple 100,000 subscribers. Now you have nearly 2 million subscribers, 4 years in. So we're here to talk about audience. How do you build an audience? What's the value and the importance of an audience? And we're just going to pick your brain until there's nothing left. Does that sound all right?
Well, it's not going to take very long. There's not much in there. No, it was a wild ride. Like, Jonathan actually approached me and pitched the idea for the show about 6 months before we got started. And he got literally two sentences into his pitch, and I cut him off, and I was like, I know exactly what the show is. It's going to be a 1 million subscriber show. My thinking was it would take 4 to 5 years to get there. We started publishing in April of 2020 because, COVID, people were stuck at home watching movies and having mental health crises. And I was like, we got to get on this because it's only going to last 3 or 4 weeks, and then lockdown's going to lift and everything's going to go back to normal. And then in late November of 2020, we had sort of very steadily been gaining, and we had gotten up to about 3,000 subscribers. And I remember we had a conversation on November 13th when we hit 3,000 subscribers, and Jono and I were like, wow, 3,000. Okay, we're really doing it. And then we went into this weird thing where we just kept doubling subscribers and viewership every day for 10 days in a row, essentially.
Wow.
And at a certain point during that, we were like, I guess this is just the new normal. I guess we're millionaires now. We're going to be making $3 or $4 million a year. That's not what happened. But for a minute there, it was crazy. And we went from 3,000 to 300,000 subscribers in about 3 weeks. And then since then, it's just been a nice, steady growth. But as far as like the secret, how do you build an audience? How do you grow a show? The best answer I have for you guys is be really good friends with a therapist who's an exceptional public presenter of therapeutic information, and then write his coattails.
Well, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit here, but I appreciate the context for people because I'm sure most people listening to this show know who you are, but if they don't, they need to go over and check out Cinema Therapy. It's an amazing show. So let's dive into some questions, because we've got questions.
It sounds like, though, what you're saying from a filmmaker point of view is that content plays a part in it, right? So, I mean, Jono and you have created content that people want to watch. So that's like an initial thing. We have to create.
Yep.
If I'm an independent filmmaker, is there an audience for the type of content I'm creating?
Yeah. Yeah. And the secret of the internet and YouTube is there is an audience for, like, no matter what your content is, no matter what it is you want to make, there will be an audience for it.
Okay.
It may be really, really hard to find that audience, and that audience may not be huge, right? Like it's really funny. People ask us all the time, like, oh boy, how did you get so successful? Because obviously we have 1.6 million subscribers, and we're like north of 200 million total views at this point. And it's, by any metric, we've been a very successful show, but you also have to determine what success actually is for you. And how to, like, if you're a filmmaker, like, how to right size your production to meet the audience that you can access. So, doing the work to build an audience is important. And Garrett, you've been doing this work for, 10 or 15 years now, of building an audience that is willing to come out for faith-based, but not punch you in the face with it movies, which is the Garrett Batty genre, as far as I can tell.
Wait till you see The Carpenter.
Except The Carpenter, which literally punches you in the face with it.
Wait, literally? It's like a 3D, 4D.
It's a 4D thing. They actually hire ushers to walk around and just deck people. It's a wild experience. It's
one of these ways we're going to build an audience.
It's the new cinema. But so there's an amount of, like, right sizing your stuff to meet the audience that you have, and then taking that right size thing and like, what can you do as a creator to expand the audience with the content? Because, like, I don't know. I see a lot of filmmakers online who are trying to grow an audience, because obviously everybody wants to grow an audience, right? If you control an audience, then you control your destiny. And so people are trying to do that. But a lot of filmmakers that I see are trying to do it the same way. Like, they're talking about filmmaking. And you're a filmmaker talking to filmmakers. It's just sort of a snake eating its own tail at that point. Find the stories you're passionate about telling, and start telling those stories while working on your film would be my, I don't know, 2 bits of advice.
Yeah. So diving into that a little bit deeper, though, like, you could have made a show where you and Jono get on and talk about movies for 30 minutes and then release those movies. And I don't think you would have the audience you have now. So you definitely had conversations along the way to say, here's how we're going to do the audience building aspect that pairs really nicely with the content. So what were some of the strategies that you guys talked about as far as how do you engage the audience? How do you interact with the audience? How do you grow the audience? How do you monetize the audience? All those things come into play, especially on YouTube, which is where a lot of people go to do those things.
Sure. For us, we've always been very, and this is going to sound sort of tawdry or cheap, but, like, we've always been very analytics driven on our show. We pay very close attention to what people are responding to. YouTube provides you a little retention graph of, like, a lot of people are watching here, and then we said this word and people dropped out. You can't say moist on the internet. Don't say it. Okay. I just said it. I lost a third of the podcast audience.
Lost our audience.
You just Trojan horsed us.
Yep. You can't say ending. You can't say ending words on YouTube. If you say in summation or like end to end things, people just drop off. Even if you're halfway through the video, they'll be like, oh, I guess this video's over. I don't understand it.
Okay.
But anyway, that's one thing to keep in mind. But so we've been very analytics driven, which means we have leaned into the types of movies that our audience wants us to talk about. Like Jonathan and I love animated films and animation. That's a big part of our show. It's a lot bigger part of our show than we had initially expected it to be. We're also children of the 80s and 90s, and we expected a bigger part of our show to be, the movies we grew up on, and no one cares. Apparently, no one in our audience wants us to talk about the Terminator or Back to the Future or Indiana Jones. Nobody cares.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. We care. We're raising our hands. Can
I know.
Raise 2 hands? Yeah,
you guys are both middle-aged white guys like me.
So, okay, well, you bring up a good point then. In building an audience or in maintaining an audience, there is this dilemma of what comes first, like the content or the audience. Am I developing content to serve the audience, or am I trying to fight an audience to serve my content?
Sure.
I think it's a question relevant to filmmakers or
it's a question relevant to any artist or creator, right? Like if you make a thing and people really love it, is that the thing you make now? Or are you bigger and broader than that as an artist, right? And, we occasionally feel pigeonholed, and it can be a little frustrating. On the other hand, we can talk about Inside Out and get millions of people to watch. So it's like, I guess we'll talk about Inside Out some more. And we also try to strike a balance, right? Like we don't exclusively make the things that we know we're going to perform. We still test, like, can we, do an episode about something else? We just, we're releasing an episode as we're recording this tomorrow about Scott Pilgrim versus the World. We have no idea if that's going to perform or not. I really hope it does, because I want to talk about every Edgar Wright movie forever.
What's interesting is that
who knows? Yes, yeah. Daren, I see your Cornetto trilogy backdrop.
Uh-huh. So
this is why we're friends.
There is that balance then where you have the freedom, because you have an audience. Now you get to introduce them to something new. Not that you're discovering Edgar Wright, but
no, but there is an amount of that, right? Like we did an episode just a few weeks ago about Speed Racer, which I've got behind me over here.
Yeah,
see it, but that is one of my favorite films of all time, and just criminally underseen and underappreciated. And we had it did not perform particularly well for us. It still got a lot of views, and we got a lot of comments on there like, wow, I never really thought about watching this movie. I'm going to check it out now. And again, it's not that the Wachowskis need the money, but it's an incredible movie that I find really emotionally impactful, and these people are going to have a cool experience watching it now. So that's kind of why we do that. But that can translate to your own. Obviously, we're commenting on other people's movies. So our show, even though we have our creative spin on things, it's ultimately not our own creativity necessarily, but like.
So that's a good segue to the next bit, right?
Okay,
sorry,
go for it.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but you were thinking about, well, how am I going to wrap this up? So
I was scrambling, and you've saved me. Thank you.
Don't say in summation or conclusion.
Nope, we're not going to say any of those words you just said.
No, that would be terribly moist.
Oh gosh. So, Alan, the premise of your show is you've got a filmmaker that needs therapy and a therapist that loves movies, and so you went into this, and as we talked about at the very beginning of this interview, it's like we go way back. So we've had many conversations about cinema therapy over the years. So you kind of went in going, okay, but how do I parlay this into my directing career? Because you're a writer director, you are also an actor, a visual effects guy, and so many other things. But really, you want to be a director, and so you have successfully done that. You've parlayed that audience. I'm going to keep saying that word because it's great. But you've taken that audience and you've brought them over to your world and said, hey, if you like the films that I'm talking about over here, you might like the films that I'm directing and writing over here. So tell us about that aspect, and how did you do it? And what are some of the things that have come because you did it successfully?
Yeah, it's actually been really exciting. So we, as many creators do, we have a Patreon. And initially our Patreon was kind of just a way to, we shoot long on the episodes because Jono and I like to talk. And this was a way to give people like an extended, like a director's cut of our episodes. We also create some additional material. Some of it's therapeutic. Some of it is, filmmaking driven, where like, we have a whole series where I'm trying to teach Jono how to use film gear, and it's fabulous. He's so technically adept. It's magic.
That's funny.
Super fun. So, just goofy stuff like that. And then we do like little comedy sketches and stuff sometimes, just as a creative outlet. But what we have done in the last couple of months is we've actually rebranded our Patreon as Cinema Therapy Studios, and the money that comes in on that Patreon, we're using a big chunk of it to just make original films. So in, holy crap, 4 weeks, we roll cameras on an original short film that the idea was submitted by one of our patrons. So one of our fans, she submitted this great idea for a story that was actually, it's pretty much just a story from her life. And then we, changed some characters around and, did a rewrite, but it's, I'm calling this an inspired by a true story, because I think we've changed enough of it that it's no longer a boats, like based on a true story. Yeah. It's not a boats movie. It's an IBATS movie. Yeah, we're making a 24 minute short film, shooting here in Utah and in California. And this is a thing we get to do because of our patrons. And it's going to be first for them. Like, we'll release to them. We'll try to do a festival run. We'll see how that goes. And then eventually it will release, publicly on YouTube so anybody can watch it. But the patrons also get a whole bunch of really in-depth behind the scenes stuff about making the movie, but also because of the therapeutic focus of our channel, we're doing a bunch of like therapy deep dive stuff where Jonathan is going to be talking about how we developed the characters, because he helped with writing. And then he's going to be interviewing the actors to like talk with them about like, okay, here's the therapeutic stuff that your character is dealing with. How did you approach that? Was it therapeutic for you? What did you learn about yourself? Stuff that you don't get on a normal DVD or Blu-ray behind the scenes thing. Like, we're going a lot deeper.
Yeah. So that's where you're at today. But like over the last 4 years, you've had a couple of iterations of that, right? Where you've told your audience, I'm making something. If you want to support it, come over here. Can you talk about the other projects as well? Because I think as this episode releases, we're still in the middle of our Kickstarter for Faith of Angels. And so we want to tap into a little bit of your experience with how you've taken your audience on one platform and brought them over to another to make short films.
Yeah. So Daren is being modest. He produced a short film that I directed just over 2 years ago.
2022,
yeah, in 2022 we shot it. It released in early 2023. But yeah, we made a little horror movie that I'd been kind of noodling on for a few years. And that was instead of having our patrons who are like monthly subscribers to our content, this was just a Kickstarter pitch. And we put together the pitch, posted it on our Cinema Therapy YouTube channel, and we were asking for, do you remember, was it 15 or 18,000?
I want to say 15.
I want to say it was 15, and we hit that in the first, I think it was 15,000 and we hit it in 18 hours. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Which totally blew us away. We ended up raising something like $36,000 to make this, little 10-minute short film that all takes place in my house. So It was one of the higher budget per filmed minute things I've ever gotten to work on. And, we shot the whole thing in my house in 2 days, which was great. We got to work with an amazing crew on that because of the money that we raised. Sorry, what was the question? I have ADHD.
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of the trajectory of these stepping stones to get to now where your Patreons, your audience is essentially you've unlocked the next level. So your audience is just supporting your creative.
They're basically,
because you are serving the audience.
Right. They're basically directly supporting that. And the goal with that is to get to the point where Cinema Therapy Studios is making feature films that we can then, I have been voraciously consuming this podcast because the goal is to get to the point where we're making features and distributing them ourselves. And we have this built-in audience of, our cinema therapy fans. And then how do we take that and grow it and expand it and reach other people as well?
Yeah. How to expand it. That'll be the sequel to the podcast, is after build your audience, how do you expand it? Or so we need to have you on for a whole.
How do you not get canceled by it eventually?
Yeah. How do you rebuild your audience?
Yes. After the scandal, how do you do it?
Well, we've kind of been going in reverse order then, right? So we talked about where we're at today. We talked a little bit about how you got there with the Patreon, and then before that with the Kickstarter and kind of the early stages of a membership with the audience. But what are some of the things that you've consciously done to get people off of like social media, for example, into your ecosystem? That's the term I use, at least, for
sure.
They're on your email list. You can contact them. You have permission. You know who they are. You have their contact info. What are the things that you've done to do that? Because there are plenty of filmmakers out there who have built up an Instagram of 2,000-3,000 people, but that doesn't mean that they can then go to them and say, please help support my next thing. Right. So what did you do to make that happen?
Yeah. Being on social media, I think we're all learning more and more. It doesn't mean you're connected with people. It means you're at the whim of a giant robot overlord that can shut you off at any time if they want to.
To put it lightly,
to put it in terms that are not scary at all. The main thing that we've done is because Patreon is a creator built platform, they're very, very open with if someone signs up for your Patreon gets their email address, and so do you. So that's essentially how we're building our email address. And it's not paid only. They have a free tier on there as well. So we're around almost 4,000 paid members, but we have more than 10,000 free members, which is great because those are all people that we can just talk to anytime we want. Even if we don't go through Patreon, we can just send them an email. And those are people who are engaged enough with our show on YouTube that they took the time to go to a completely different website and put in information, which means a shocking amount on the internet. It's so hard to get people to do anything that's not just swipe. And so the fact that we've been able to do that is huge. And that's our mission with our show and moving forward is to, as much as possible, try to bring people into that ecosystem, the way you put it, Daren, because then we can reach them with any of the other stuff that we want to do, not just pray that the YouTube algorithm puts our next thumbnail in front of them on a page of 19 thumbnails.
It's very much the same consideration that we're taking as an independent filmmaker, saying the distributors they have the key. They get to be the gatekeeper, and as much content as we make, the distributor has the audience, and we hope that they'll say yes to take our movie. And you're saying, no, YouTube or social media, whatever it is, might change tomorrow. So we need to make sure that we have a way to stay in touch with our audience. How big of a role does like all the little side videos, TikTok and Instagram and everything like that? Your primary audience is YouTube, but you've got all these other things.
We do, yeah. We're on TikTok and Instagram, and we're not really on Twitter anymore. We're on Threads, though. Until Threads also becomes terrible.
Now called X. Technically, nobody's on Twitter.
I will not call it X. I don't care.
Okay.
Just call it Moist.
Sorry.
That's our new social media platform coming soon. Moist. Send
like my own
people.
question. So, as an independent filmmaker, how much do I need to pay attention to? Yeah, hey, I put my trailer on YouTube and people are watching it. Or no, I need to do cut-ups and put it on shorts, and then I need to do reels and stories.
Reels and TikToks and sort of short form vertical video is yeah.
We all just shivered.
Yeah, that's enough to get me to unsubscribe.
There's a place for it in film marketing and independent film. Like, I'm not sure that putting cut-ups of your trailer on there is the right move necessarily. In those places like TikTok and Reels in particular, what you're going to probably want to post is if you've got, real punchy, funny stuff or sort of a shocking scene, if you're making a horror movie, and you've got a big gasp moment, maybe put that on there.
It seems like a great outlet too for like BTS stuff. Like your
great outlet for BTS stuff, particularly if you've got like big feels or big laughs. That you can get in 1 minute, right? That's the place to post those. Now, that being said, those two things are not going to do a whole lot to drive traffic off of those sites. We have found, and a lot of people have found that, if you have a lot of success on TikTok, it's not going to translate to much of anything else. And people don't create deep relationships with TikTok and Reels creators. They found this at VidCon. VidCon over the last couple of years, sort of did a big pivot to like, hey, we're going to get these big TikTok creators. And these are people with 16, 20 million followers on TikTok. And they'll show up to give a talk and there will be 20 people in the audience. And they'll have YouTubers with 200,000 people, 200,000 subscribers, and the room will be full of 400 people.
Why is
because
that?
Because they have a deep emotional relationship with YouTube creators. It's parasocial, which is weird, but also kind of nice in a way. Like, there's apparently, and this is the strangest thing in the world to me, hundreds of thousands of people who have a deep parasocial relationship with me. I don't know who they are. It's just the nature of the internet. The cool part about that is there are people who, approach me on the street and stuff, and I can absolutely make their day just by being a kind person, because they're like, the world is good. And it's like, I guess just don't catch me on a day when I'm hangry. But the problem is with sort of the vertical platforms, because of the length of the videos and the fact that people don't click through and then just watch every video from that creator or get like a long story of a thing, you just don't develop the same kind of relationships. So for like film marketing, if people are seeing, 8 or 10 touches from your movie, that's like, oh, here's a funny BTS thing, and here's another funny BTS thing, and here's a little bit from the movie, and oh my gosh, this Jesus just watched this guy punch out another dude, and he was like, good job. Like, in the case of your movie.
I don't think I've seen it, but I get what you're saying.
I know he never actually spectates, does he? Spoilers for the film.
No, anyway, sure that he never goes to a match. It's like he wouldn't go to a football game, but we still give him credit for making the touchdown.
Exactly. Touchdown Jesus is real. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm opining wildly at this point, but like I don't see how effective that stuff is going to be in terms of marketing. That being said, it's a low cost of entry to do it. So,
and that's maybe what we have to balance out as far as look, we're doing this marketing campaign for these two movies. One is coming out September 12th. And then the other is November 1st.
Yep.
It's Daren and me and a small team that are doing this. So we probably have to determine, look, what is the risk reward or the effort?
For you guys, it's a time consideration, even more than a dollars consideration, which I know is, you're not swimming in money for this, but.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So you're exactly right. We're not at all. So do we take the time to cut up BTS stuff and do it on TikTok or whatever it is? Or is that building an audience? And it sounds like you're saying that might create awareness, but it's not necessarily building an audience that you are going to be able to engage with.
I don't think it's going to build, because I mean, ultimately the goal is to build a relationship with these people, right? You want them to trust you. Like you want them to think about Garrett Batty, 2 Coin Productions, 3 Coin, 9 coins.
We're up to 3.
100 coins. Now. You're up to 3 now. Okay, good. 2-bit productions. That was.
I've heard it all. I've heard it. I've heard everything. I challenge you to come up with something I haven't heard about 3 Coin Productions.
I can, but none of it can air on your podcast. But you want people to like have the same feeling when they hear, ooh, a new 3 Coin movie that I get when I hear, ooh, a new Pixar movie, right? Like,
yeah.
I for decades have had an emotional relationship with Pixar that is, like, why? It's just because they make great films that I really like.
Which is an interesting side conversation, and one I'm going to ask right now. Are there other distributors that we have that relationship with? Do we hear? I mean, you got A24. You're like, okay, I know what I'm going to get. If it's A24 is a new Warner Brothers movie, or this is another Universal film, it's not like I'm in line to buy a ticket to Universal.
The big studios generally don't have a brand. I would say like strong brand equity. You've got Pixar, obviously top of the heap. A24 is getting up there. Blumhouse has pretty strong brand equity, particularly in their like niche of horror fans. It's like, oh, it's a Blumhouse movie. It's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
I would add.
I think Angel Studios is trying to
Angel Studios is definitely getting there in the faith-based space.
Yeah.
Daren was saying working title. Amblin, maybe.
Kind of sort of nerds, yeah.
I don't know if your average moviegoer's like, ooh, an Amblin movie. Like
your average moviegoer isn't thinking about working title either.
They're not thinking about working title either.
So then, I mean, to relate it to this podcast, then in building an audience as a filmmaker, where do I put my effort? Do we say, I want to build 3 Coin Productions as, whatever, the brand that people are going to recognize? Or is it, I want to build a film by Garrett Batty, or I want to build a film, it's the Brian Grazer, Ron Howard duo.
Right.
And we know they're going to be awesome. What do we...
So that's the question is, where do you put your marketing dollar, right?
Right.
So the studios are spending $100 million plus to market a movie every time, because every movie is a new brand. This is why they love, sequels and prequels and requels and whatever else. How much of my dog is coming through, by the way?
Just enough to know you have a dog.
Excellent. But like, because there's already brand equity, right? So their $100 million goes further than, what the heck are these Blue Cat people? Like, how do I sell this? Which is a, franchise now, but,
as Avatar for the uninitiated.
Yeah. Sorry. That was
took me a second. I was like, what?
Blue Cat people, Blue Cat people in space. So that's, the question is, do you want to build brand equity for the movie? Do you want to build brand equity for the filmmaker, or do you want to build brand equity for your company?
Yeah.
And if you're building it for your company, then the movies all have to have a general feel that fits, right? A24 makes, they make comedies and
They're all
horror movies and thrillers and high art films and stuff, but they all kind of feel like A24 movies.
Sure.
In a way that, they've done a great job of building a brand equity that's like, oh, this feels like an A24 movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the studies have even shown that like people follow people, not businesses online. So if you look across any industry, Richard Branson has more followers than all of the Virgin groups combined. Ronaldo and Messi have bigger followings than like the top 30 MLS plus all the other league teams combined.
Sure.
Tim Cook has more followers than Apple does. Elon Musk has more than Tesla. Like, doesn't matter the industry. People want to follow people online. And so that's an interesting thing that I think deserves Garrett and I talking about it offline and going, hey, we're going to start all these new social media channels for our movies and then they're going to go away. Should we instead, or in addition to, funnel some of that effort and that extra firepower behind your brand so that people are following Garrett Batty? It's a Garrett Batty film, and this is another Garrett Batty film that's coming. And it's an interesting conversation. I'm glad we touched on that.
Yeah,
it's very awkward to have right here on this podcast.
It is. Well,
Offline.
And it's
we'll take it off.
Like it's we've ventured into a brave new world, right? Like my whole life, I wanted to grow up and be a filmmaker that was poster famous. So you see a poster and it says an Alan Seawright film and people go, ooh, I want to see that. But nobody knows what I look like.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like name on poster famous is what I always wanted to be. And now I completely failed.
Everybody knows what you look like.
Well, everybody in a certain niche demographic knows what I
was saying. You failed because people know your face, not because you're not a filmmaker.
Yeah, nobody knows my name on a movie poster because I haven't done that, but they do know my face. So I failed miserably. But it's a thing I've struggled with is like, okay, as I'm working on building up, the film career, being able to leverage, and I'm very, privileged to be able to do this now, is like I have an audience. Now I'm just moving them over here. But as I'm doing that, do I try to build the brand equity of Telekinesis Entertainment, my company, or do I leave it just with me? Or do we promote the film and Telekinesis and me? How does that split work? These are questions that I'm also trying to figure out. So hopefully we can figure them out together and achieve world domination.
Well, by building our audience.
All 6 coins.
We'll add some more coins and increase the budget. Daren, I think your point is really interesting about the people following people rather than businesses. And Alan, I mean, you are the only Alan Seawright. Like Telekinesis could be anybody. It could be involved with people. If I get an email, marketing email from Warner Brothers Home Entertainment or Warner Brothers Distribution, I know what it is. If I get an email that says, "Here's the name, here's the director's name," or whomever, I'm like, oh, I'm clicking on that.
Can you imagine getting an email from your favorite director?
Edgar Wright.
They have a one-to-one relationship with you. I would read every single Edgar Wright email ever. And I would probably frame some of them because he sent it to me and I'm so special. But that doesn't happen. They use social media, which is great. But
yeah. I think there is a world that's wide open that hasn't been tapped yet by filmmakers building a relationship with their audience. And I mean, there are dangers in that too, right? Like, what if you have a strong relationship with your audience and then you make a movie that's really personal to you and most of your audience hates it?
It doesn't resonate. And I go,
And they feel personally betrayed, which is, a thing that can happen. It's tricky. It's going to be an interesting thing to navigate going forward. Cause I do think that's the sort of the future of at least the independent side of our industry.
Yeah.
I think so too, Alan. I think it's bleeding into even the bigger, Hollywood side of it. When we see even last summer, you look at Barbenheimer and you go Christopher Nolan and Margot Robbie were the faces of those campaigns, and
Yep.
certainly those are by no means independent film, but my goodness, Margot Robbie can put her name now on any film, and there's a very broad audience who would say, "Oh, I'm familiar with her. I want to see that."
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Yeah. Well, and Christopher Nolan is one of the few, I would say that he's as strong a brand name at this point as Pixar. Right. And the evidence is Oppenheimer. Like, he made a 3-hour movie about people sitting in rooms talking to each other, and it made $1 billion.
Man, that's so great.
Yeah.
Yep. I think Barbie and Oppenheimer both owe each other a little bit of credit, though, too.
Oh, they absolutely do. I've read some stuff, and obviously, you can't prove a negative, but like I've read a lot of stuff where people are trying to figure out what the Barbenheimer phenomenon did to both movies, and the estimates are it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 million for each film.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Just from the crazy, weirdness of that weekend, which was such a fun weekend of filmmaking. Did you guys do the Barbenheimer thing?
Yeah. It was so fun.
It was a blast. That was one of the best days of movie going I've ever had.
Yeah.
Alan, it's easy to see why you've built an audience. You're fun to talk with, and your insights are insightful.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, and thank
moist.
you, and for sharing those with us. Yeah, it's cool. So where can we find more of what you're doing with your indie film? Where can we see that, or what do we go?
Join my Patreon. No, you can go sign up for the free tier on our Patreon. It's Cinema Therapy over on Patreon. And then you'll get, updates as they come in and as all of that happens. Otherwise, just follow, honestly, the best place to follow us is on YouTube, at Cinema Therapy. I'm at Alan Seawright on most of the social medias, and I'm really terrible at posting on there.
Yeah. Okay.
Like we just talked about, it's important to build, personal brand equity, and I'm real bad at it.
Or if you want to catch Alan's very sonorous voice, you can see Faith of Angels in theaters and listen for that Easter egg.
That's true. Yes. I think we should give away a prize. I will say it right now. If there are any listeners to this podcast who can spot my voice the day it opens in movie theaters, you can't go to a pre-screening and you can't jump the gun. You got to wait for it to be publicly available. Write into Daren or Garrett, and I'll send you something.
And what?
I don't know.
I just want to know
cookies. I'll bake you some cookies.
I want to know if I should start a fake email and
no, you'll get some Cinema Therapy merch, and yeah, we'll send you a bunch of stuff. It'll be fun.
I'm doing it. You're gonna get an email from GB.
You can't do it, Garrett. You know where it is.
Oh, my.
GB at 2bitsfilms.com.
And that'll be the one that
2 Bits Films has got to be like, once you have a giant, mega conglomerate, 2 Bits has got to be your like little indie label.
That'll be the next LLC. For every movie I make, I have to create an LLC, and then there's always some sort of behind. So it'll be 2 Bit Films. 3 Coin Productions presents a 2 Bit film.
2 Bit Films.
Oh, okay. Well, these are things of what not to do to build an audience. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Say hello to your therapist friend, Jono.
I will do that.
Oh man, I love that guy. So good.
Right? What and how kind of him to come and join us on this podcast. He's got a million other things to do and 2 million followers to tend to.
Yeah, it was very generous for him to take some time and to come chat, because I didn't want to say this in front of him because it would embarrass him, because he doesn't like the spotlight, but like Patreon, the company, has literally flown him out to talk about the strategy they've used to build an audience on Patreon, because it was one of the fastest growing. They have one of the highest average donations per subscriber of any other Patreon channel account, I think is what you would say. So like they know what they're doing. He's being very humble about their strategy. But like, if you wanted a playbook to follow as a filmmaker, granted, you may not be able to build a 2 million or a 1.6 million follower channel in 4 years, but you don't have to. You can use the same strategy to say, how are we going to build something that allows us to get more of what we want? And for him, it's the ability to make movies on his own without needing permission, without having to wait for investors. So now every couple of months, if he wanted to, he's got an audience of people who are funding his movies, his short films. And at some point, probably in the next year or two, they're going to start funding features. You know, we're talking 6-figure budgets to be able to go out and make a movie on his own terms. And he already has the distribution laid out because he's got, at that point, probably 2.5 million followers. So it's such a great strategy that they've laid out, and you can follow every step of it.
Yeah, the principles are the same, and they just need to be scaled. And it's either building it from the end, like the distributor who has access to the audience. So these guys are circumventing that by just building their own audience, or the beginning is the investors who are going to fund. And these guys are building that with their audience. It's awesome to see, and I'm so glad that he would share those things with us.
Yeah. Oh, that was a good one. I hope people share this episode with their friends because that was really, really good. Listener questions. You get any listener questions in today? I got one. The question is, what do you guys think about AI? This could be an entire episode, I think. But like, the context of it was, you know, an AI film trailer has been released. The TCL has put out that they've made an entire movie with AI. And we saw in both strikes last year and the potential strike this year, the negotiations this year with IATSE, that the concern of AI replacing filmmakers and film workers is really a prominent thing. Like that's top of mind for a lot of people working in our industry. So, you know, within that context, how are we feeling about AI and film and the future of this industry we love and work in?
I am certainly very uneducated on AI and the processes and the steps, and that's probably a risk because, you know, I hear the stories of, oh, AI is going to replace me and filmmakers and every job out there. So I am uneducated on it. So he said, yeah, I don't know if I have an intelligent answer. Maybe that is the answer. How do I feel about it? I'm too focused right now on these movies that we have to release to really dive into it. I do think I've dabbled a little bit in like, hey, AI, help me write a press release, or help me, you know, whatever it is, put together a distribution agreement, or take a look at this contract, AI, and see, can you, parse this contract and tell me in simple terms what it means. And I've appreciated that. It's been very, very helpful. I haven't yet see it replace a shot that I need.
Yeah, it's true. So my thoughts on it are ever evolving, but I try to pay close attention to what's happening in the industry. And one of the key things that I think all business owners and entrepreneurs, and especially filmmakers, need in their arsenal of like characteristics is this ability to anticipate what's coming. Because if you're kind of just siloed and you're doing your own thing, that's great and it might work out, but you could miss some things if you're not paying attention. And so I always look at incentives, and your big studios, your 8 companies that are like running the film industry, they have incentives to drive costs down. Like that will always be a pressing incentive for the big companies. And so you're constantly, whether it's every 3 years during a negotiation with the guilds and the unions, or whether it's more frequent than that, you're going to have them trying to sneak in AI whenever they can, because it costs less. And if they can produce what now costs $300 million to make for cheaper than that, that means their upside goes up and their profit margins are better, and that is better for their quarterly reports, right? It's all financial driven. It's all driven by shareholder value. And so you got to look in the incentives and realize that like, they're not going to give up on that. They're not just going to go, oh, we didn't get what we wanted this time, so I guess we'll never try again. No, 3 years from now or 2 years from now, it's going to come up again and they're going to try to do more with AI. And so one thing that I'm really big on though, or bullish on, I should say, is that true like craft, you'll never be able to match it. And so you can feel something that's made by a human. Art is a language, and you're able to communicate through the way you direct, through the stories you tell, through the shot choice, through the actors, the way they choose to portray a character in a moment. Those things are never going to be replaced by AI. They could copy it pretty well, but you'll always be able to tell a copy from the real thing. And so if you're an indie filmmaker like us, like keep telling great stories and use as much of the human element as you can. That's what I intend to do. But I'm never going to take my eye off the ball when it comes to AI, because you don't want to just get wiped out because you weren't paying attention, because something took over something that you've been doing. It was a blind spot.
I'll consider that a warning. I do need to pay attention to it. The question that was submitted was, how important are film festivals in your distribution plan? And it's a great question, and one that we will use to tease an upcoming episode with, where we'll talk to a film festival director and get their take on film festivals. In short, I think they can play an integral part of securing distribution or being a promotional element for a film that we're distributing ourselves.
Yeah. I would just double stamp that like 100%. It's great strategy, and I'm excited to dive in. We do have that one queued up in the future episodes, so make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Go over to 3coinpro.com/podcast. Subscribe. We'll send you a cool couple of welcome gifts, and you'll get the opportunity to ask questions like these. So please do that and tell all your friends. Thanks for listening today. Garrett, another great episode. I'm loving this, man. Very excited for what's coming down the line for us. We got a couple of months until our movies are out. And I think we're going to have the overlap where at some point for I don't know how many weeks, we're going to have 2 movies in theaters, which is super cool.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Yeah, that's a good point. That's very likely. Okay, thanks. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for listening
to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified of new episodes and screenings, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're leave us a review on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.